Welcome, welcome, welcome. Today's guest is Mary Beth Ferrante. She's the founder and CEO of Work 360, a company that helps organizations support, engage, and retain working parents and caregivers. She's also a mother of two. We have a really good discussion about the value working parents bring to an organization, what is fair play and how it applies in the workplace, why it's important for non-birthing parents to take family leave, and much more. My name's Anthony Franzese. You're listening to the Successful Working Parents podcast, where we talk to working parents about how they're able to balance it all and still thrive. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe. Anyway, on to the show. Welcome back to the Successful Working Parents podcast, the podcast where we talk to successful working parents. Title still pending. My guest today, she is the founder and CEO of Work 360, mother of two. Ladies and gentlemen, Mary Beth Ferrante. Mary Beth, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so thrilled to be here.
My pleasure. If you would, please share a little bit about your career.
Sure. So I, like so many, started in the corporate world and worked for just over a decade, primarily in financial services in roles stemming from HR and leadership development to strategic planning. And I left my corporate role doing business strategy for the small business bank over at Bank of America. So it was intense and crazy and a lot, but I learned a lot, and I ultimately decided it was not the space that I wanted to continue my career. I left after the birth of my first child. So she's 9 years old. So almost 9.5 years. Well, I guess 8.5 years ago is when I left. So after my first parental leave, I returned to work. Thought everything was great, got promoted to SVP while I was out on leave.
Nice.
Working for a company that had all the check boxes, paid leave, top places to work for working parents and working moms, and had the benefits, but quickly realized I worked for a team that did not understand care, didn't center care, did not focus on the well-being of their employees. And ultimately, I made the decision to pivot based on that experience and create Work 360, really focusing on how we can better support caregivers in corporate America.
Awesome. And so how does Work 360 do that?
Ultimately, we have three main programs. We really focus on how do you support individuals, but even more importantly, their managers through kind of key transitions for employees navigating care. So parental leave is an obvious one. We provide coaching and training for the employee, but also for the manager on how to help that employee plan for their leave, create their parental leave as an advantage and an opportunity in their career, and really focus on the re-onboarding process. So how do you reintegrate somebody after leave? Because oftentimes we just leave it to chance. The thought is, well, they've been here, they're fine, they can walk back in and everything will be just okay. What happens is that the manager and the organization doesn't recognize that you as an individual have gone through a huge transformation. You've gone from being this potentially just working professional to maybe even a stay-at-home parent for a certain amount of time. You're changing diapers and figuring out what in the world it means to have this little child, this little newborn in your arms all day long. And then you've got to figure out how to blend it all together and become a working parent. There's little recognition, if any, of that transition for parents. And so that's really what we focus on in that program, is to make sure that re-onboarding experience is really well supported, that it is an opportunity to really think about how you integrate care and how you integrate your career and create like a strategy that's going to work for you. But ultimately also ensure that managers feel like they know what they're doing, because it is awkward. And if you work for a leader that, isn't a parent or had kids 20 years ago or just wasn't really that involved in the home life, they don't understand your experience and what you're going through. And they feel really awkward about having conversations like, Okay, how often do you need to take a break to go pump? And why do you not want to travel this month? And okay, you really need to miss that meeting. There's just so many things that come up that we want to make sure that managers understand how to better support their employees as well. So we really focus on like that cultural aspect of training leaders and supporting managers. And then we do that same thing for other kind of key transitions throughout the journey of caregiving, because it doesn't just end when you have a baby. That's when it just begins. And so a lot of our programming supports not only new parents but parents at many stages, and also those caring for parents and adults and elder care. I have two aging parents. My dad is 81. Like, I'm in that sandwich generation
Yeah.
with so many others, and so we really focus on how to help employees navigate those tricky moments without losing sight of what they want in their career.
So do you ever come across managers who are annoyed or like hesitant that their employee is going on leave?
Absolutely. I've had managers say straight to my face that they don't hire women of a certain age because they're going to take leave and they don't want to deal with it.
Wow. What do you say to them?
Well, usually a little bit of shock of,
Mhm.
I can't believe you actually said that out loud.
Yeah.
But I also appreciate that you recognize how challenging it is, and the space that managers are put in, because oftentimes, especially in the US, and we work globally, but particularly in the US, managers are left on their own, right? They aren't given the support that they need. If they're going to have somebody out for 4 to 6 months, they're not given a backup person.
Mhm.
They don't have additional resources. They're feeling stressed out. So I usually respond with, I get it, but let's really talk about what that means and how that's limiting your team and limiting the potential of your team and the potential of who you could have really working for you. Because it is a challenge. And if we aren't giving managers the opportunity to talk to their leadership about what they need and feel supported, of course they're going to feel, whether they say it out loud or not,
Mhm.
like, oh, that's annoying that my employee is gone for X amount of time to care for their new kid.
But what is that manager supposed to do?
So it really stems from the way the organization sets it up. So I think there's a few different paths that they can take. One is, is there opportunities for them to talk to their leadership about reprioritizing what needs to get done on the team while they're down a person? Or can they actually borrow potentially headcount from other teams or share headcount or things like that? If that's not possible, then we really look at like what's happening within the team and what are your key deliverables, what are your KPIs, what are all the things that need to be done, what can be deprioritized or completely taken off of the plate of the team, and then how do you distribute the work amongst your team? Where are there actually opportunities to look at, more junior employees that are hungry for additional responsibility and use it as an opportunity to actually empower them to take more responsibility and ownership? What are the things that you can retrain people on? But if you're not having those conversations before the person goes out on leave, you are then floundering and you're just trying to tread water. So what we're really trying to do is make sure that we're giving that support and having those critical conversations before the person actually goes out the door for their 3, 4, 6 months of leave.
One thing I've been talking a lot about to my guests is the value that a working parent actually brings to an organization.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm wondering not just your own thoughts on that, but if there's any data that you've come across from your work that kind of bears that out.
Yeah, I mean, when we look at what are the leadership skills that are being reported as top of mind for CEOs and C-suite teams, it is things like adaptability, problem solving, being able to have more empathy and work with their employees. And some of those, so-called soft skills are actually becoming the hard skills that we need, because technology and AI and all of those things are moving so quickly that we're having to adapt and adjust to the way that we work and how we work, that actually leading becomes so much more about how you connect with your team and how you actually you like retrain them and work with them to become more adaptable. And those are the exact same skills that you learn by being a parent. And there's a few studies out there that actually focus on the brain changes that happen for new moms and for non-birthing parents who are actually caring for newborns. They can have those same brain changes that a new mom has simply by being a parent that is present and actually focused on the needs of a newborn. So they will learn and their brain will expand on how they become responsive to cues, how they actually become more empathetic because they're learning how to care for a baby. And so when you look at why those skills are important in the workplace and how parents are learning them through this experience, it also helps some managers recognize like why it's so important for non-birthing parents to take leave and how it can actually set them up for more success and train them to be better leaders. So, I think it's all part of a bigger conversation of what are your challenges within your team and what keeps you from wanting to support or work with parents and getting into some of the flexibility and just like the day-to-day tactics, but then also recognizing what are they actually learning and what are you going to gain from having this person on your team and ensuring that you keep them engaged and keep supporting them even through kind of a trickier time in their career journey.
So the argument for increasing non-birthing parent leave is that if you give them the chance to be hands-on with the child and to be a part of that experience, they're going to have these
Develop.
brain changes and develop these new skills.
Yeah, that and like quite frankly, they're going to also level the playing field for equity in the workplace. I mean, one of the most simple things that we can do is if all employees are expected that at some point they will take leave, right? Like we are all impacted by care. Every single one of us is either currently a caregiver, going to be a caregiver, we are currently receiving care, or we are going to receive care. So if you actually go in with that expectation that every employee at some point is going to need time, is going to need that ability to be cared for or to care, right? It changes the dynamic around equity in the workplace as well. And if that is a goal for the organization, if that is still on their, must do's of we're going to increase women in leadership by X%, well, this is a way to do it.
I think part of the issue could be if someone's a bit older, they might take the stance of, well, that's not the way I did it. When I didn't have that support, I didn't need that when I did it.
Yeah, there's a huge shift in generations. I mean, only about 40% of baby boomers that are currently in the workplace have or have had a partner that also worked.
Yeah.
Whereas about 80% of millennials are dual career couples. And 89% of professional women millennials, are part of dual career couples. So there's a huge shift in just like how people are operating in their homes and how that translates to their work. And so we do have a lot of conversations. And one of the programs we run is Fair Play at Work, which is all about the unpaid labor in the home and how much it contributes to overwhelm and stress and burnout, and educating leaders on what that is, why it's important to recognize in your employees, and how to manage it differently. Flexibility, number one.
So what is fair play? Can
Fair
you?
play is essentially it's an organizational design tool that you utilize to look at all of the tasks that you have within a home that are need to happen that are like home related or care related that you are not getting paid for, but are work. It is actually work, right? And looking at how do we address this? How do we name it? How do we make it understood so that it's actually valued between the adults and the partners in the home so that they can be also rebalanced? So primarily, we did a report with, or we did a study with USC just this year and looked at, a few hundred parents that had toddlers at the time. And out of all of the 100 tasks, Fair Play basically breaks it down into 100 tasks. The only one that men own completely and think about as well as actually do is garbage, right? Every other 99 of the other tasks, there might be some participation in the actual execution and doing of the task, but every single other thing, the woman in the relationship, in a heterosexual relationship, was owning the conception of it and the planning of it, all the thinking and the strategy.
And is that, I guess there's like a bell curve, right? Like there's the outliers and there's the people on the fringes, but that was kind of the majority.
Yeah, absolutely.
So play, I imagine, was originally intended to help. I guess it was to help like the wife bring more awareness to the husband of what she's doing and what how much work it actually is, right? And now, but so let me pause there. Is that right?
Yeah, I think it's to really value the work, to be able to talk about it in a new way, to have it seen and understood because it is so invisible. It's things like laundry and dishes and all that stuff that just seems to get done.
So
And
was it originally like a couples therapy kind of a tool?
we actually do train therapists on it, and they use it quite often. Yeah, I think there was two pieces of it. It was one, letting women know that they're not crazy, that it is a lot,
Yeah.
right? That they're doing all this. And there's this idea that we just should, or it's intrinsic to who we are, or, we just care more, or we're better at it. Well, no, we just have been doing it and haven't really been letting our partners often into the fold and helping them see all the things that need to happen within the home. And so it gives people a way to talk about it.
And then how does it apply in the workplace?
In the workplace, how we use it is kind of twofold. I mean, we're really actually taking principles from work and bringing them into the home, which is kind of interesting. But then in the workplace, it's one is to give everyone the understanding of how much work is done in our society outside of the workplace, right? How much unpaid labor actually keeps our homes, our economy, everything happening. So that there's just a general recognition that this is work, right? That like when people are in their homes and having to do 3 hours of work before they, to get their kids out the door and get lunches made and make sure that the laundry is started and do the dishes, and then they get to work for 8 hours or
Yeah.
10,
Yeah.
right? And then they go home and do all this stuff. Like if we aren't changing our workplaces to recognize that that is now on the plates of not just this one person who's kind of in the background and invisible, but is actually also leading a team and running a division, they're also doing all those things in the home,
Yeah.
right? Like that's why they're burned out. So what can we do in the workplace? Well, we can think about how we do our work, what can be asynchronous, what actually has to be in person. It helps us look at flexibility, hybrid versus, are we really bringing people back to the office 5 days a week? That's a big thing happening right now. Like, how can we actually help them make those decisions with data that says, if we encourage everyone to come back 5 days a week, we're going to lose people because they are doing all this unpaid labor that we haven't recognized and we're not understanding is critical and has to get done. Right.
Yeah, it's really like the cards are stacked against you, right? It's like so much stuff that has to get done, regardless of if it's the man or the woman doing it.
Right. It doesn't
If
matter.
you're like if you're like whatever the domestic duties are a full time job in themselves, right?
Yep, exactly. And I think knowing that that is what is contributing to workplace burnout.
Yeah. So that contributes to workplace burnout. It sounds like a big part of the solution is just bringing awareness to it so that they can then treat employees differently or kind of come up with some different work strategies.
I think it's more about helping them be thoughtful about their policies.
Yeah.
Right. And giving them that understanding. The generation that maybe is at the top or is leading these teams is set up very differently than the generations below that are running these teams and getting the work done in the workplace, right?
Mhm.
And so, what works for senior leaders to be in an office 5 days a week because they love that camaraderie and they love that impromptu, meet in the hall and have a brainstorming session. Like, that's great. And we can create environments where that can happen. But it's also going to hurt your employees and cause more stress and overwhelm if the expectation is that they always have to be here. There's no flexibility. There's no opportunity for them to really juggle the work of the home.
Yeah, one of the things you and I were talking about before this call was that the feelings of overwhelm that a lot of people experience today are part of a more systemic issue, right? And this is kind of what we're
Exactly.
talking about.
Exactly. And so, one of the things that we're really working on with some of the work in fair play is just how do we recognize it, even with like the Bureau of Labor and Statistics? How do we talk about unpaid work and how it drives our economy, and understanding that that is one of the biggest things leading, I think, to burnout for parents. There was actually a report that came out it was late October, early November, and it was from the Surgeon General of the United States saying that parenting is bad for your health.
Yeah, I saw that. I saw that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
it's like the new
And
smoking.
yes, exactly. Parenting is the new smoking. Well, it's not the having kids part and the raising them and having to connect with them and the joy. It is all of the things that are continue to be invisible and the expectation that we just handle it without any support. And so that's where I think having these conversations and being able to bring it into the workplace, it really facilitates better policy
Yeah.
and, better flexibility, better engagement from employees, better like looking at what needs to happen in person versus what can happen in remote environments or asynchronously, and how do we actually accomplish and get work done so that people feel really supported. And this is, it looks different in every industry. There are industries where you are 100%, you have to be in person, right? Healthcare is a perfect example of that. Okay, so but then how are we setting it up so that when we look at their policies for things like paid leave, that there is that backup support, that there is another person to fill that gap, because there isn't the same kind of like remote flexibility that like more corporate roles have.
Okay, so I can see how an employer would be interested in having more support handling parental leave and preparing for it and transitioning back afterwards. When it comes to the fair play at work, help me understand: are employers looking to help like bring educational resources about fair play into the workplace, or are you kind of coming to them and saying, "Hey, this is something you might not have thought about. You should check it out." Like, where's the demand there for that?
Yes, and both. I mean, so both. I think where we see it being really picked up is in like manager and leadership development programs. We've had a lot in the last decade of primarily focused on women, right? Like, how do we support women to continue to grow in their careers?
Yep.
Um, and it's like, all right, we got to get them a great mentor. We got to get them a great sponsor. We've got to teach them to advocate for themselves more and negotiate better. And it's like, no, I mean, yes, sure, some of that. And the missing link is we also need to acknowledge all the work that they're doing outside of the workplace,
Yeah.
right? We need to acknowledge everything that's happening that's not getting paid for.
Yeah.
And we need to support them with that too. And so, where we've seen a lot of success with this is actually those leadership development programs that are now incorporating the how do we support the unpaid work too? How do we ensure that that piece is part of the puzzle to continue to allow people to grow in their careers? And it might look different than it did 10 years ago, 20 years ago, definitely 40 years ago.
What's something you want the audience to know about Work 360 that we haven't talked about yet?
Great question. I think the most important thing from our mission at Work 360 is to really encourage employees and managers to value care and recognize that it exists all the time, right? It's a journey. It's not a moment. that care is going to ebb and flow, and you can stay engaged in your career when you have the right support and you're able to have really honest and open conversations with your employer about when you can accelerate and kind of step on the gas and go for that promotion, and when you might need to coast for a year because you're now caring for your sick mom and you still want to be engaged and you want to be loyal to that company, because then if they are in turn loyal to you, you're going to go gangbusters for them in 2 years when things are resolved.
Yeah, I like that. All right, we're gonna move into the final segment called Mary Beth's Advice Corner. So I'm gonna ask you for some advice on a few topics. Okay,
Okay, great.
what is your best piece of advice for working parents?
Don't shit on yourself.
Don't shit on yourself.
Yep.
Okay.
So, should. Whenever you hear that
Oh,
word,
don't should on yourself.
correct.
Not shit. Okay, should.
No, but similar,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
Don't shit on yourself.
Okay.
Whenever you hear yourself saying, "Oh, I should be doing X, I should be doing Y, oh, I should be over at this thing for my kid, oh,
Mhm.
I should be at this work thing." Pause. Take a breath. Where's the should coming from?
Mm.
Is it actually a priority for you? Is it something that you're interested in? Is it aligned with your goals? Or is it an expectation from society, from somebody else, something that you just feel like you have to do because everybody else is doing it?
What advice do you have for self care?
Oh, self care is such a crazy little topic. Do what works for you. Self care is not bubble baths and chocolate and manicures and spa days. It is rest. It is mental health. It is physical health. It is friendships and relationships. So think about what actually fills you up. And, in the work we do around fair play, we talk about the happiness trio, which is self care, adult friendships, and what we call unicorn space, which is the thing that makes you you. It's outside of your professional role, it's outside of your parental role, it's outside of your role as a partner in a relationship or anything like that. It's the thing that makes you you. And I think too often we lose it. And so when it comes to self care, I would say start with what makes you feel like you and focus on spending time on that and not what you think should self care should be.
What advice do you have for balancing work time with family time?
There is no balance. Balance is a dirty word. I think it's what works for you and your family based on your goals and your professional roles and your roles within the home. And creating that career and family strategy for yourselves is really important to feeling like you have some balance. I think oftentimes we are just trying to do it all, men
Mhm.
and women, quite
Yeah.
frankly. I think the great thing is that more dads are showing up, right? They're showing up for their kids, they're showing up in spaces they haven't before, but it is leading to overwhelm for everyone. And so I think knowing that like balance is really personal, and knowing that you've got to sit down and actually think about what it is and what it means to you to create a life that enables you to have it.
Yeah. By the way, I didn't tell you, but I do a lot of the domestic things in my house because I have more flexibility in my job than my wife does. And
Yeah,
funny enough, she does the garbage actually of all the things. So but I handle like the cooking and cleaning, and she takes
that's
out the
awesome.
garbage. But yeah, I get it. I mean, it is a lot to do, and then get work done, and then have any time for yourself. So I definitely get it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think that the idea of balance is kind of old, right? It's more about what's the priority in the moment and what do I need to focus on? You kind of think about there's an analogy out there of like the rubber balls versus glass balls. And it's not like work is one and home is one. It's that every activity and thing that you need to do is its own glass or rubber ball. And sometimes you can let it go and it will bounce. And sometimes you can let it go and it will break. And so, what are those things that are breakable and how do you prioritize them?
What advice do you have for someone that's listening and wishes that things were a little bit more equitable in their home as far as balance of duties and doesn't know where to start?
I think the first thing is to see what would you need to shift in your home to make things a little bit different. And if it's just, well, I just need my partner to do more. We all want our partners to do more in so many things. Giving them a list doesn't work, right? So you really got to start with, okay, what's our end goal? Is it that we both want to have time to have 2 hours on the weekends to ourselves? Is it that we want to have more date nights? Is it that we both want to be able to go out with our own friends more often? Like, start with the end in mind of like, what do you want to accomplish for both of you?
Yeah.
Make sure you're in alignment on that and then get into the how.
What is the best advice you've ever received?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question. Um, hmm. I think, especially as an entrepreneur and running my own business, the best advice that I have received is to simply just keep going. There's always going to be ebbs and flows and setbacks. And I think the biggest difference between success is those that have one conversation or try it once and it doesn't work and they give up instead of learning from it and pivoting or trying it again or trying it a different way. And I see that with our clients too, especially in rebalancing their homes and having those conversations with their partners. Having one conversation with your husband or your partner isn't going to change everything.
Yeah.
You've got to be able to think about it and keep going and keep trying because it's a journey.
What advice do you have for someone that feels like they're not a good parent?
If you think that you're not a good parent, you probably are. If you're even having that conversation in your head, the fact that you're thinking about it means that you're doing a lot more than most. And you should be really proud of yourself for even thinking, hey, I might want to do things differently.
That's a good point. I bet a really shitty parent doesn't really think about it, you know?
Nope, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't care.
Right. They don't. That's why they're shitty.
Exactly.
Um, what advice would you give to your former self?
Oof. I think to my former self, I remember really just very distinctly sitting in a class my last semester of college, my senior year, and being like, I know exactly what I want. I know and always knowing I was going to be a working mom, knowing I wanted a career. And I think what I would tell my former self is just success can look different than what you think. And sometimes you need to step back to actually move forward. And it can be scary. So I think I would tell my former self to be brave a little earlier in my career.
Last question. By the time this episode comes out, my daughter will probably be like 19, 20 months old. So
Amazing.
what advice do you have for me as the father of a 20-month-old daughter?
Oh, I love that. Enjoy it. It's super fun. I know everybody says that, but also like it is a great time for you to really hone your negotiation skills. Mothers are notorious for being able to push your buttons a million different ways, and they are super funny and they are crazy, but they want to start to do it their own way. And I would say give her or give him or her, give her give her the opportunity to explore when it's safe and enjoy the ride.
Awesome. I will do that. Well, Mary Beth, this has been a great conversation. Where can people go to connect with you, learn more about you, anything you'd like to share?
Absolutely. You can just head to WRK360.com. That's our website. And you can find me, Mary Beth Ferrante, and LinkedIn. I post a lot over there, and it's a great way to engage.
All right. Well, I'll link to all that in the show notes. Mary Beth Ferrante, ladies and gentlemen. Mary Beth, thank you so much.
Thank you.